I am Coach Sess, motivated and determined, and you are listening to Words with a Mad Coach. What's up, Mad World? It's me, Coach Sess. And coming to you today, I want to talk about some things we have coming up regarding mixed martial arts, some of the events in the area, in the surrounding area. And right now I'm talking to Elite Warrior Challenge, trying to get Damon Blackshear, Paris Artist, Isaiah Monroe, Justin Starks, and Chase Vettel on that card. So I'm trying to take 5 guys from Team Rock to that event. Paris Artist will be making his MMA Pro debut, hopefully. Got a couple names lined up, but nothing definite right now. And some names have been thrown out for Damon Blackshear as far as his pro fight as well. And Isaiah will be defending his title, hopefully, but we'll see how it goes. And of course, in March, we have Fight Lab 58, where I'll be doing the commentary, and that show is going to be headlined by Dewan Owens versus Mike Stevens. That's going to be an excellent, wonderful card, and so we're going to talk about some of that. And I just want to give you a few ideas in terms of how to improve your training today. And one of the things I just want to give you 4 basic tips that will help improve your training. First thing I want you to do is optimize or organize your time. All right. In other words, make time to train whatever it is that you want to train. Make time for it. Make a definite time slot. Give it a beginning. Give it a deadline. The reason for that is because it becomes it puts pressure on you to accomplish the goal. And don't worry if it's not perfect at the end the way you want it to be. The idea is to get started. The idea is to go through that process, and it'll help mold you and get you into the habit. And that's all you really want, is get into the habit and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So set the time, use the time, execute. The second thing is identify your intent. So what are you using the time for? What do you want to get better at? Is it you're not going, if you set a small time frame, and in terms of frequency and duration, you're not going to master everything in a particular art, but you can master one particular aspect. So you may not master jiu-jitsu, but you probably have a very, very good arm bar if that's all you work for the next 6 months, working on it an hour a day. All right. But what I want you to do with this intent is identify what it is that you want to improve, whether it be an overall art, but you need to go back to the time slot and say, hey, I got to have the appropriate time to go with that for that improvement. If we're talking about just one element, maybe you don't move your head enough when you box. Give yourself 3 weeks and measure yourself from where you are to where you are in 3 weeks. But identify the intent, whatever it is. I'll leave that up to you. Then come up with an action plan. How do you get there? In some cases, you're going to need a coach. In some cases, you're going to need knowledge. In other words, if you haven't done it before, then you're going to need very specific knowledge about the thing that you're trying to accomplish. But if you've been doing it, but you've slacked off, or you just never had the best training in that area, find yourself a coach. Find yourself someone who does it a little bit better than you. Find someone who makes unique distinctions about the way they're doing it. Maybe take a guy like Damon Blackshear in our gym, relatively small guy, but he never really gets hit. Figure out what it is that he's doing to never really get hit. And then borrow some elements from him. And but whatever it is, make an action plan. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and organize it into a nice little process. Because when you go through a process and you get to a sticking point, if you've documented everything along the way, you can look back and see which parts were working and which parts didn't work, and you can substitute and exchange. Okay, so make sure you're documenting. And which parts didn't work, and you can substitute and exchange. Okay, so make sure you're documenting, whether that be written or videotape, or having someone observe you and they're tracking your performance day in and day out. And then number 4 is the final product itself, and that means execute, act on it. So in other words, once you get to a point where you've developed this new particular skill, you've put in the time, you're working your plan, all right, then try to actualize it, make it functional. If it's not working out the way you want it to work out, that's okay. Go back to that repeat, rinse process, and make little distinctions and cut it up, chop it up. And you want to give yourself different scenarios to test it out against. All right, so you don't want to say, hey, I'm going to work on my head movement for the next 6 months, but then you never test it, because for the following 6 months all you do is jiu-jitsu. Well, jiu-jitsu doesn't require you to slip out of way of punches necessarily, all right, especially if it's just sport jiu-jitsu. So make sure you test it in different formats. One could be you have one partner just throw the jab at you and you move your head. Another element would be if you're working on boxing and you're using head movement to get into the clinch or a takedown. So make sure you test it in various formats to make sure that the new skill has took hold. All right. So again, those 4 qualities, those 4 pointers that I gave you, you want to maximize your time, identify your intent or your mission statement, your goal, make an action plan step by step, all right, or process, however you want to word it, and then execute it, and then go back and fix whatever problems you have at the end. And so, speaking of time, today I had the fun of going to work. I don't go to work too often, but I do help part-time, and I went to work, felt really good. Went in to help a friend, a co-worker, prepare for an audit, something I'm somewhat good at, and it felt good to go in and help her out. And then I spent, at work, I spent a little time negotiating some stuff with Elite Warrior Challenge, Jeremy Bourdon, Melanie Lowe, trying to set up fights for, Devon, Paris, Isaiah, and the guys. Then now I'm home and I'm doing some audio for Fight Lab 58, just to give you a preview of some of the things that I've seen about the show that I like already. And going forward, we're going to be talking about that show on a more in-depth basis. The last time when I talked about Fight Lab 57, I talked about the fights in general, and for the most part, I talked about the main event. Now that we've got some time leading up to that event, I'm going to talk about each fight in as much detail as possible. So today I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of some things that I saw, some things that I think are really great about the show, and some things that you should look for when you come to the event. So one of the things I noticed was In Fight Lab 57, they had about 16 fights. And what I've noticed the difference with this show is there are fewer fights, but the fighters are better. And what I mean by that is that going into Fight Lab 57, the number of fights that the fighters had in terms of experience was total to about 143. All right. So here we have 12 fights. There they had 16. Here we have 12 fights, and the experience factor is about 158. 158 fights between the fighters. So we're going into the fight already with more experience. So that means the matchups are going to be a lot more intense, a lot closer, and that takes me. I'm gonna segue right here over into Tapology. In Tapology, they have this page where you can, predict who's going to win. And I noticed that the other day that, it had certain fighters ranked, 80% to 20%, 100% to 0%, and that's far from the truth. That might be wishful thinking, but on shows like Fight Lab, whenever you see 80% taking prediction versus a 20%, it rarely ever goes exactly that way. Not for every fight on the card. So there are some exaggerated numbers I saw, and every time I see that, I know it's going to be a great show, because I know that there are going to be a lot of upsets. Because I looked at those numbers, and it had Dewan Owens winning by saying 80% chance of winning, and Mike Stevens 20%. It's not always going to be that way. It said Curtis Cloward is going to beat Derek Hyatt 80% to 20%. That's just when you have 12 fights on the card and you keep seeing that consistently, there are going to be about 6 upsets on that card. Roughly 6, because the potential is there for it to happen either way. My old coach Ken Armstrong would say, you have to fight these damn fights. And that's what these fighters have to do. They have to go out and fight. You can't go by a reputation. You can't depend on what happened in your last fight. You have to go out and fight these fights. So Tapology might be over exaggerating this. I don't know exactly who makes up that, but they might be over exaggerating. Fight Lab 57 had 5 championship fights. We've only got 4, but they're all quality matchups. And again, it's headlined by the 155 Pro title with Dewan Owens and Mike Stevens. Some battles that you should look forward to: Brian Battle versus Brandon Schofield. Even though the experience factor leans towards Schofield, I think he was 7-2, 7-1, something to that effect. And Brian Battle is 3-1. What I notice about both guys in these fights is when they lose clean. They get finished. But when they win, they finish people. They don't have a decision between them. So that's a fight that I would look forward to, that these guys are going to go and fight till the end. I don't think we're going to have to worry about judges for that particular fight. Another fight that I think is pretty exciting. Could be a very technical fight, or could be a slobber knocker, as old JR from WWE would say. Shelton Sales taking on Team Rock Anthony Wright. So the reason I say this could be a very technical fight is not because of Shelton's wrestling or Anthony's jiu-jitsu. It's because they've actually had some interaction before from the same area. I think Anthony may have stopped in their gym a couple times, and he's trained in and around that area. The thing that you need to realize is that you're not necessarily good because you're good in your gym. It's because of your circle, your circle of influence. And Anthony's trained in that area. He's done well in that area. He's fought in that area. So there's like a bleed over. There's some trade off. Shelton's fought one of our teammates, and Devon Blackshear. There's some bleed over. There's some trade off. There's some things that he's walked away with from that experience. Win, lose, or draw. There's some things you walk away with. So this could be a very, very, very technical fight. Or again, it could be, as OJR would say, a slobber knocker. Another fight on the card is or fighter that is going to inspire you is Avery Evans. So somewhere around 2015, Avery Evans was in a motorcycle accident, and he and I chatted online a couple days ago, and he told me this incredible story, about his trainer Keith Rockstar Richardson, who ended up, pumping blood out of his lungs, just so he could survive and live. He talked about his mom and family members having to feed him and bathe him because he couldn't do anything for himself. And just, the overall sense and feel that I got from him was that this is not a fight about his opponent. This is a fight about him having that, what could be described as a near-death experience has changed, has altered his mindset in terms of living. He realizes that maybe time is short and it's time to do what he needs to do. He talked about it so much online about, he's not going to waste his time anymore. He's looked at the 185 division and he says, they don't have anything for me. Not just coming here to win this fight against Jeff Henry, but I'm taking out the entire division and I'm getting the title, and I like when he says the title, because it gives me an impression that it doesn't matter where a title is. If you weigh 185, he's taking your belt. So the sensation that I got from him just makes me want to see that fight by itself. I was really impressed. Avery's also in the past fought one of our Team Rock guys, and he got a decision win over him. So I know what he brings. I've always admired the Modern Warrior guys. One year when I did my in-year awards, I think it was for the first time I actually said, hey, our opponents of the year was Modern Warrior MMA. I care about them that much that I had to label them and say, hey, they were the best opponents that we had all year, because they bring it. Win, lose, or draw, they always bring it. And that's what I love about those guys. If you're going to make it to the top, that's who you have to be. And as far as, the main event goes for Fight Lab 58, again, that disparity is there in terms of experience and actual fighting with Dewan Owens and Mike Stevens. But Mike Stevens comes from a hell of a background training with Chris Clodfelter, who is a Muay Thai champion, a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, world-class trainer in my opinion. So I would not sleep on Mike Stevens. And I say that because Mike Stevens just came off his last fight, taking on a guy with a little bit more experience and KO'd him. And then you want to look back at, in terms of Dewan Owens, hoping that he's not taking this guy for granted, because he just fought Ryan Jett, who had a lot less experience than he did. And Jett went all 5 rounds with him, because Jett had a lot of pop in his arsenal. And look at our own Damon Blackshear, who fought Keith Rockstar Richardson, who had a lot more experience, and that fight went the distance. You can't sleep on these guys that have less experience, because and Mike Stevens fits into that same category of these guys with fewer fights, but they're really starting to shake up the MMA scene locally or nationally. A good example of that, why I think these guys are able to do that, a good example of that is Rory McDonald. You're seeing these guys that come, like Mike Stevens, Damon Blackshear, and Ryan Jett. They're growing up in MMA, just like Rory McDonald did. And we just saw recently on one of the more recent Bellators where McDonald picked up his first world title. He's kind of, in my opinion, he's that poster boy of what MMA is supposed to look like when you grow up in the system. And now we finally see someone finally really win a world championship, without coming from a strong world champion jiu-jitsu background, strong wrestling background, strong world champion boxing or kickboxing background. We finally seen a real grassroots MMA guy become a world champion. So I think that the skill level has jumped a little bit, and now you're seeing guys come up and they're living up to it. And I think that's why you get that sentiment from, and Avery Evans who's saying, you know what, it's my time. It's time for me to go out and show the world what I can do. And on that note, as I leave you here, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to leave you a video of my favorite fight of Avery Evans from Fight Lab, and he fought Gregory Smith. Two big men. He didn't win this fight, but I thought it was fight of the night between two big guys. So I'm Coach Cess, and you've had words with the Mad Coach.
Gentlemen, went over the rules in the back. Protect yourselves at all times. Obey my commands at all times. Touch them up if you want. Good luck and back them up. This is going to be good. You ready, sir? You ready, sir? Put your mind, peace in your mind. Stop. All we're going to do is slide out. You get back in position. His head off the ropes. Turn this way. Get right back where you was. You lay down. You get back, come out just like you was. Hold out.